So there's a real battle going on for the top-selling $600 price electric guitar. It's a dead heat between Epiphone and Fender. Let's take a look. Hey everyone, this is Chris McKee with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. So there's a very popular price for a new electric guitar, particularly if you've been playing for a while or you're starting out, and that's around the $600 price range. Now, the two top-selling guitars in that category, kind of throughout the industry, come down to the Fender Player Stratocaster and the Epiphone Les Paul Plustop Pro. These are perennial favorites. They are favorites of ours and two guitars that we happen to sell and stock in the store. So we decided to take a look at both of them and see what is so compelling that has people buying these in droves over so many others, and to try to determine which one comes out on top between them. What separates them is about $80 in price and a variety of features. These are very, very different guitars. So we're going to put them through its paces, talk about what is the same, what is different, and why you might choose one over the other. So definitely stick around. Now, if you'd like to see some reviews on these or kind of what else is offered in the range, make sure that you check out some other videos on our channel. In fact, we have some that talk about all of the Stratocasters that Fender offers up through the line, so I'll put a link to that there. We've covered many things from Gibson, including some of their Les Pauls, so you want to definitely check that out as well. Now, if you're new, I want to invite you to like this video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you know when we put out a new video. Now, let's get started first with the Stratocaster. Fender, if you are playing guitar or if you don't play guitar, is probably a brand that you are familiar with. The shape of the Stratocaster has become almost synonymous with what an electric guitar is. And it is probably one of the most copied shapes in all of electric guitar history thus far. It's a very short history of about 70 years. So if it looks familiar, that's because it is. So many builders have taken this design that Leo Fender came out with in 1954 and have copied it to some extent to the other, changing things like the number of frets, the top, the shape, and whatnot. But the DNA is still there. You have a guitar body that is ergonomic to some respect, having carves here and an arm carve there, a bolted on neck, see there? Some actually have set-in necks with the same design. A pick guard that has your pickups and your controls in it, and it makes it all very modular. Now, the reason this guitar has survived for so long is partly to do with that, and that it's just a really killer recipe. This is a Player Series Stratocaster. Fender came out with this last year, and this is basically their made in Mexico Stratocaster that replaced the standard line. When they did this, they came out with a whole host of features that deal with the pickups, the body, how they even route the cavity for the body, the number of frets you get, and so forth. We've done a full review of this guitar, and I'll put a link to that there, and we talked about the differences between the Player Series and the standard that it replaced. So if you want the nitty-gritty on everything going on in here, you want to check that out. But as it stands now, this is Fender's offering kind of in this price range. Now, it's actually closer to $700 than $600, but that is kind of what's going on. Prices on guitars have been creeping up. Now, in all fairness, if you factor in inflation, guitars are actually probably cheaper than they ever have been, and they're being made to a higher quality than they ever have been, arguably. So, in this guitar, you can get it in a variety of finishes. You can get it with a humbucker or with 3 single coil pickups like this. So this is 3 single coils versus an HSS configuration. If you're not familiar with the controls, this is what you have. You have a 5-way blade switch, which is a selector between the pickups. You have 1 master volume and then 2 tone controls that will affect different pickups. This tone control will affect the bridge and the middle, and then the top tone control will affect the neck pickup and give you sound. That basically rolls off the high. The selector switch allows you to go from position 1 through position 5, and they allow you to get a combination of bridge, bridge and middle, middle, middle and neck, and neck. When we do a demo on this, we're basically going to play through position 1, which is the brightest, through position 5, which is the warmest or darkest sounding. It features a 25.5-inch scale, and that's important because we're going to talk about that in relation to the Epiphone. 22 frets, and it has tuner's 6 inline on one side, which is typical Fender hallmark there, and the Fender name up there on the headstock. It's a maple fretboard, maple neck. and an alder body with a beautiful sunburst finish. Now this guitar, like most Stratocasters, is equipped with a tremolo system. Basically it's a vibrato. It allows you to bend the pitch of the note utilizing a tremolo bar which threads into it here. That is something that the Epiphone does not have, and its bridge has its own unique set of benefits. But if you want to waggle it, so to speak, use that whammy bar, you can change the pitch and get a lot of different sounds out of it, which is a nice effect. Some people never use it. They just block it down, and that's okay too. You can kind of do whatever you want here. It's a great palette for making music. That's the point. You know, as we do a lot of these videos, some people often ask, what's the best guitar? Today, that's kind of a question like, what's the best guitar? The actual answer, oftentimes, the one that's in your hand. Make music with it, all right? So that's the Strat in a nutshell, okay? We're also gonna talk about the Epiphone and what sets it apart. So the Epiphone is a brand from Gibson. If you're not familiar, Gibson and Fender have long been competitors, but Epiphone was also Gibson's competitor until they bought them out back in the 60s, I believe it was. Epiphone is now the brand name for Gibson's import brand. So while that Fender is made in Mexico, this is actually made in China. And if that upsets you, I understand. But I gotta tell you, there's nothing wrong with this guitar being made overseas, and the fit and finish is fantastic. It maybe allows it to come in at a slightly lower price despite the way that it's constructed, because it is constructed in a less modular fashion than the Fender Stratocaster is. So a Les Paul, period, is typically going to be this single cutaway body with a carved top. Okay, so there's a carve to it, if you can see it there, versus the flat top on the Stratocaster. A mahogany body, it's a maple top. In this case, it is a solid maple top with a maple veneer on it to give you that figure, whereas an actual Gibson Les Paul would have just a solid piece of very figured maple when you see figure on it. It is bound with this nice cream binding, and the setup on it is very different from the Stratocaster. So you have a three-way toggle switch, which gives you access to either of the pickups or both. And then you have two primary pickups. These are humbuckers. Now, the term comes from when they were invented. Two coils together get rid of what's called 60-cycle hum, or it bucks the hum. It also gives you a fatter, typically darker sound with a bit more gain. You are able to switch between the bridge or the neck pickup, or have both. This guitar is also equipped with a more modern feature that old Les Pauls didn't have, and that is a coil split. On both volume controls, you can pull it up or push it down. If you pull it up, that's going to split it and give you more of a single coil sound, a little bit more reminiscent of the Stratocaster that we just looked at. You have two volume controls and two tone controls. So whereas kind of at first blush, you might see, oh, three-way versus a five-way selector, obviously the Strat's more versatile. Not necessarily, because you have a three-way selector with humbuckers, you have the splits, you can choose one or the other or both. You have all of those selections tied to the three-way, and then you have two volumes and two tone pots that you can use to really craft the sound that you're going after. It's a shorter scale, 24 3/4 inch, and that's going to affect the hand feel and the tone. Typically, that's going to give you a warmer tone and a slightly looser feel on the strings than the longer scale Stratocaster is going to be. Beautiful fit and finish, like I said before, 22 frets, and the neck is not as round. It's a little flatter, a little thinner feeling than on the Stratocaster. That's kind of preference on which one you prefer. The Strat has a satin finish and a rounder neck profile, and I prefer that neck profile, but I tend to also like shorter scale guitars. So kind of a little bit of both. 3 on a side tuners. So these are easy to tune. It's typical and similar to an acoustic guitar, but it has its own little idiosyncrasies, shall we say, that come with that kind of a setup. And then the bridge down here, as I mentioned, it's not a tremolo, it's not a vibrato bridge, it's a stop tail piece. You can't change the note down here. Of course, you can always do that with your fingers, but what it does give you is tons and tons and tons of sustain, because these strings are locked in. Now, here comes a question. We're going to compare these two, but why would you buy these instead of a more expensive model? Or maybe better yet, why would you buy a more expensive model from Gibson or one of the USA-made Fenders over these? So at this price, you're getting a really great guitar. Both of these have really excellent build quality. There's nothing inherently wrong with either of these guitars, and they would serve you better, or serve you well. But if you've been playing for a while, if you've had access to more expensive guitars, there are little things that you begin to pick up. And I do want to point those out to you because these are great guitars, but there's a reason that this Epiphone Les Paul is less expensive or more affordable than a $2,500 Gibson Les Paul that's made in the USA. So it's got a fantastic finish. It's a poly finish rather than a nitro finish that you would typically find on a Gibson. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it other than it's typically thicker, and that's going to affect the resonance of the instrument. The neck profile, like I said, it's kind of flat feeling. I don't really care for it a great deal. It's not uncomfortable. It could just be that I'm not used to it. But between the two, I think the Fender feels better. And a Gibson Les Paul certainly has a different neck profile than this Epiphone does. The pickups are really great pickups, particularly at this price. And the fact that you have the coil tap as an option is really compelling. The pickups do not sound as good as USA Gibson pickups. All of this should kind of go without saying, but some people ask, why is this more expensive? And I figured it'd be good to point out to you. So these have a bit of a darker feel to them compared to the Gibson pickups. And just kind of less articulation. There can be some muddiness, particularly if you're playing with some gain and overdrive. So you want to keep that in mind. If you buy this and it sounds great, great, don't worry about it. If you play it and you kind of pick up on some of that, that's what you're hearing, is some less articulation, and when you add drive, it becomes more apparent. Now, I mentioned some idiosyncrasies, right, with the 3 on a side. Now this happens on Les Pauls. This will happen on any guitar that kind of has this kind of headstock. Because what's happening, if you look at the strings here, is they're not going directly to the tuning post. They're going through the nut slot and they're turning a bit. And so what happens is it can create some binding in the nut. And if you bend the note, it could get stuck and it goes out of tune. So what happens is you bend it, it basically pulls the string forward in the nut, and then it gets stuck there and it doesn't go back. And now the string is flat and you have to retune and the chords are out. And you can address that. That can be addressed with lubrication of your nut. It can be addressed by taking it to luthier and having them go through with a file and make sure it's nice and smooth, and even adjust it so that it moves smoothly at an angle. There's all sorts of things that can be done. But I bring it up because it's typically more common on a lower price instrument to deal with an issue here than it is on a more expensive one, because there's more care and attention taken at final quality control and during the build process at this point. Otherwise, frets are great, electronics are great, everything's great. You don't get a case, it's a really good guitar for $600. Now, you do deal with some of that on this Fender as well. The tuning thing we just talked about, it's a straight string pull, okay, so you're not dealing with an angle. You do have the string tree, and the nut is not as well dressed as an American counterpart would be, and those are also equipped with a bone nut. And so they stay in tune better, it sounds a little bit better. So just keep that in mind. Those are some of the differences that you're going to deal with on these guitars. But for about $600, these are amazing instruments, and you could gig with these, absolutely. The only other downside that people complain about, there's actually like a meme about it, is that this says Epiphone on the headstock, and that there's a thing you can get that goes on top of the headstock and makes it look like a Gibson headstock. Whatever. It's a great guitar. Epiphone's been a great brand for a long time. You shouldn't be ashamed because it says Epiphone on the headstock, okay? All right. So with all that said, let's kind of put it through its paces. Keep in mind what we discussed with the controls, because as I play through these, I'm going to switch it so you can hear the different sounds that are coming through the amp with both of these guitars. And I should tell you what we're playing through is a limited edition Fender Princeton reverb that has a beautiful kind of Western themed Tolex on it. And so that's going to make it sound more Western. But it sounds good. Check it out. So there you have it, the Fender Player Stratocaster and the Epiphone Les Paul Plustop Pro. Maybe we can add a few more adjectives to increase the name of the Epiphone even longer. Two great guitars, they're very different, they serve different purposes, but they're both equally versatile. Now, there's probably a question you're asking, why are these at like the top of the sales charts for this price range, right? We're looking at these two guitars. There's a lot of other guitar companies out there. There's a lot of other models of guitar out there from both of these companies. It boils down to this. The Stratocaster and Les Paul are two of the most popular guitars, period. And they're two of the most popular guitars because they've been around the longest. They've been played by countless famous musicians. They're on countless records. They're sounds that we're used to hearing, and they're what we typically think about when we think of electric guitar. Now that doesn't mean that guitars from Ibanez or Jackson or Schecter or Charvel or any other brand is a lesser guitar at this price range, but there's a reason these have been perennially popular for so many years. They're great guitars and they're really hard to go wrong with. So definitely check them out if you're in the market for a guitar kind of in this price range. There's lots of people who have chosen these. All those people can't be wrong. And hopefully this video helped you understand the differences between each of the guitars, what might be best for you, for your playing style, and what appeals to you. And if you were the snob that said, I don't want that guitar because it doesn't say Gibson on the headstock, well, there's Gibsons that are kind of near this price range. You can get those. Those are great guitars too. They probably won't be as versatile, as feature-filled as this, but it will be a Gibson. It will be, say, made in the USA on it. So there you go. You can have your cake and eat it too. As always, I want to thank you for watching. Remind you, subscribe, turn on notifications. I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching our videos. If you enjoy what we're putting out, help support this channel by going down below and purchasing one of the t-shirts we've made for you. Rock your support for one of the oldest music stores in Texas and the country, and your love of guitar. Just purchase below, help support our videos, and go to our website, alamomusic.com, for more goodies that you can get. Thanks.